The promotion, the price of a lie. The ballroom lights shimmered against the crystal chandeliers as applause filled the air. He stood at the center of the stage in his tailored black suit, holding the glass trophy high, like a man who owned the world. His smile was wide, practiced, and flawless. I stood at the back of the room, holding a champagne flute I hadn't touched, my heart pounding in my throat. Everyone was celebrating his promotion to senior vice president. Everyone, except me. Because just 30 minutes earlier, in the women's restroom, I had read the message that would shatter our 20-year marriage in a single breath. Can't wait for later tonight, boss. Same room, same tie, just us. Congratulations, Mr. VP. I didn't need to see her name to know who it was. I'd seen the way she laughed too loud at his jokes in the office. The way her lipstick marks never seemed to belong to me anymore. Tonight was supposed to be his night of glory, but it would become the night everything burned. My name is Lauren Price. I met Ethan when I was 21, and naive enough to believe in forever. He was older, confident, and full of plans. He made me feel like the world was something we could build together brick by brick. We married in a small chapel in Evanston, with cheap flowers, a borrowed veil, and a promise to rise together. I gave up my graduate degree to help him chase his career dreams, while I took a corporate assistant job to keep us afloat. We were young, foolish, and full of hope. And over the years, I built a home, raised 2 children, balanced bills, and supported his endless ambition. He became the golden boy of his company, charismatic, respected, untouchable. Meanwhile, I became invisible. Every business trip he took was for us. Every late night at the office was for the future. And I believed it. Because that's what you do when you love someone so much you lose sight of yourself. It didn't happen overnight. Betrayal rarely does. First, he stopped asking me how my day was. Then, he started checking his phone during dinner. Later came the perfumed shirts, the late-night showers, and the new cologne he never wore for me. But I told myself the same lie thousands of women tell themselves. He's just stressed. Work is intense. He still loves me. When he told me about the upcoming promotion dinner, I was genuinely happy for him. I ironed his shirts, polished his shoes, even wrote the little speech note he kept in his jacket pocket. I didn't know I was preparing him for the night I would stop being his wife. The company's annual gala was always extravagant. Everyone who mattered was there. I wore a black satin dress, the same one he once said made me look like I belonged on the cover of a magazine. But tonight, his eyes didn't even linger. He was too busy scanning the crowd, too busy waiting for her. While I waited for him near the restroom, I heard laughter, high-pitched, feminine. Then the door opened, and I saw at her phone screen lighting up with his name on a text. Meet me after the speech. Room 312. She didn't notice me as she left, fixing her lipstick. But I noticed everything. I stepped into the restroom stall, locked the door, and pulled out my phone. A part of me prayed it wasn't what it looked like. But when I opened his iCloud, which he'd never bothered to unlink from our family account, the message stared at me like a knife to the chest. Can't wait for later tonight, boss. Same room, same tie, just us. Congratulations, Mr. VP. I felt my knees buckle. I grabbed the cold metal door handle to steady myself. 20 years, 2 children, a mortgage, a life. And he'd thrown it away for a woman half my age, with bright red lipstick and too much perfume. I walked back to the ballroom on autopilot. My hands were trembling, but my face was frozen into a polite smile. Ethan was up there on stage, thanking me for standing by him through everything. Everyone turned to me, applauding the supportive wife. I nodded, smiled. Inside, my world was collapsing. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes, it's quiet, elegant, wrapped in a tuxedo, and handed a trophy. After the speeches, the crowd scattered toward the open bar. He excused himself, saying he had to take a call. I followed. He walked toward the elevators with a confidence that made me sick. I didn't need to guess where he was going, the message had already told me. Room 312. I stopped in the hallway and watched as he opened the door with a keycard. She was already inside, wrapped in a silk robe with a bottle of champagne in her hand. He closed the door behind him. And just like that, the husband I thought I knew became a stranger. I didn't burst in, I didn't scream, I didn't throw the ring at him or make a scene. That would have made me the victim in his story. Instead, I walked calmly out of the hotel, into the cold Chicago night. By the time I got home, I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was calculating. Ethan Price wasn't just my husband. He was the soon-to-be senior VP of Merritt & Co., one of the largest investment firms in the Midwest. And I was the woman who had given him everything. But what he didn't know was that I also knew everything about the firm, the clients, and the secrets he thought I'd never understand. This wasn't going to be a crying story. This was going to be his undoing. The sun rose over Chicago like nothing had happened. But everything had. Ethan came home at 5 a.m., smelling like expensive champagne and betrayal. I was sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee gone cold hours ago. The moment he stepped in, his eyes widened, not in guilt, but in surprise that I was awake. "Lauren," he stammered, loosening his tie. "I didn't expect." "Yeah," I said flatly. "You didn't." For a moment, silence filled the kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the sound of his breathing, everything felt louder than my heartbeat. He lied easily, like he'd rehearsed it. There was an after-party. The team wanted to celebrate. I didn't want to wake you. I stared at him. At the man who had once held my hand through every storm. Now, all I saw was a stranger in a black suit with someone else's lipstick on his collar. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. "I believe you," I said quietly, sipping the cold coffee. And the way relief washed over his face told me everything I needed to know. He truly thought I was still blind. The next week, I played my role like an actress on Broadway. I cooked his meals, kissed his cheek in front of the kids, asked about his day, smiled at the neighbors. Behind that smile, I was memorizing his patterns. What time he left the office, which suits he wore on late nights, which car he used when he said he had business meetings, which assistant covered for him when he disappeared. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a spy in my own home. And he didn't have a clue. You learn quickly in corporate circles, secrets rarely stay secret, especially from the people who have to clean up the mess. That's how I found Carla. She was Ethan's executive assistant for 5 years. Smart, sharp, underpaid. She didn't owe Ethan loyalty, just a paycheck, and she'd seen everything. I found her on a Wednesday morning at a coffee shop 2 blocks from Ethan's office. "You're not here just to chat," she said, leaning back with her latte. "You're here because you already know." "I know enough," I replied, "but I need proof." Carla looked at me carefully. "Do you want to destroy him or save him?" "Neither," I said. I want to end his illusion." She smiled slowly, like someone who'd been waiting to say the truth for years. And then she slid her phone across the table. Photos, messages, hotel reservations, flights, even a company card statement with her name on the expense notes. The assistant, Madison Cole, 28, marketing coordinator. Not just a fling, she'd been with him for nearly a year. Business trips, dinners, out-of-town conferences, all funded under company expense accounts. Corporate infidelity wrapped neatly in tax-deductible transactions. Ethan had spent years building his empire, but he'd forgotten something crucial. I helped build it too. I had friends in that firm, real friends, people who remembered me from the early days when Ethan wasn't Mr. VP. People who owed me favors because I was the one who hosted the dinners, wrote his reports at midnight, soothed egos, and helped fix his mistakes. One of them was David Mercer, a partner in the firm's legal department. I called him for lunch. "Lauren Price," he said with a grin as I slid into the booth. "Haven't seen you in forever." "Yeah," I said softly. "I've been busy being a perfect wife." Something in my tone made him pause. I didn't give him everything. Not yet. Just enough. Enough to plant seeds. "David," I said, "if someone in the company was using corporate funds for personal affairs, how bad would that be?" His smile faded. "Bad," he said flatly. "Especially for someone about to be on the board." Bingo. Carla slipped me a USB drive 3 days later. She'd been collecting everything quietly, methodically for months. It contained hotel bookings, travel receipts, personal messages sent during company hours, call logs, emails. It wasn't just an affair. It was fraud. He'd been using company resources to finance his personal love life. If this ever reached the board, his career would collapse overnight. I held the USB drive in my hand, the way someone might hold a match near gasoline. For the first time in months, I felt powerful. Then came the dinner, the one that snapped something inside me. He came home late again. Madison's perfume clung to his suit like a mocking whisper. I set dinner on the table anyway. Chicken piccata, his favorite. "Sorry I'm late," he said casually, loosening his tie. Work was brutal. I looked up at him and said softly, "Did Madison help you relax?" He froze. Just a flicker of panic in his eyes, small, but enough. Then, like the coward he was, he laughed. "Who?" I leaned forward, my voice calm. Too calm. "The woman you've been sleeping with for a year. The one you book hotel rooms for with your corporate card." His jaw clenched. "Lauren!" I raised a hand. "Don't lie. Not tonight." The silence was louder than any scream. He stared at me, searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. Finally, he whispered, "It's not what you think." I almost laughed. "Oh, honey," I said, standing slowly. "It's exactly what I think." I didn't cry. I didn't throw plates. I simply walked upstairs, locked the bedroom door behind me, and let him stew in the quiet weight of his lies. People think revenge is loud, that it's chaos, fire, fury. But the best revenge is cold. It's patient, precise. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Not to file for divorce, Not yet. To prepare. I quietly moved my personal assets into a separate account. I documented everything. I made copies of the USB files. I secured the house deed, the kids' trust, and every joint financial record we owned. Ethan thought I was broken. But I was building something. A war plan. When the board of Merit & Co. announced their annual executive review dinner, Ethan was glowing. He had no idea it would also be the night his empire began to fall apart. I made sure David had everything, quietly. No fingerprints, no drama. Corporate boards don't care about love affairs. They care about liability. And Ethan had just turned himself into a gold-plated scandal waiting to explode. The night before the review dinner, Ethan sat next to me in bed like nothing was wrong. "Lauren," he said softly, reaching for my hand. "I know I messed up. But we can fix this. We've built too much together." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in months. "You're right," I said. "We did build this together." And then I smiled. A small, dangerous smile. He thought it was forgiveness. It wasn't. The ballroom at Merit & Co.'s headquarters was a sea of black suits, polished smiles, and champagne glasses. It was the company's annual executive performance dinner, a night where promotions were locked in, alliances were solidified, and careers were either made or ended. Ethan stood at the front like a king ready to be crowned. Everything about him screamed success. The tailored navy suit, the gold tie clip, the speech he'd rehearsed 100 times in front of our bathroom mirror. And yet, beneath the polished surface, he was standing on a trap I had built piece by piece. I watched from a corner table, wearing a sleek black dress and a calm smile. Not the smile of a supportive wife, the smile of a woman who already knew how the night would end. 5 minutes before the dinner began, Madison Cole walked in. Short red dress, confidence oozing. She wasn't supposed to be here, not officially. She wasn't part of the executive circle, but Ethan had pulled strings to get her in as his +1. He thought it would be his grand moment. Promotion, trophy, and the woman who made him feel alive on his arm. I almost laughed. He truly didn't see it coming. I leaned over to David Mercer, the legal partner sitting next to me, and whispered, "Watch closely." David smirked. It's showtime. The CEO, Richard Harrington, walked onto the stage, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight we celebrate excellence, hard work, integrity." I nearly choked on my water. "Ethan Price," he continued, "has shown exceptional leadership and dedication over the years. Tonight, we are proud to welcome him into the board of directors as our new senior vice president." Applause filled the room. Madison clapped too, beaming like the mistress of a king. Ethan stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked toward the stage with his perfect fake smile. He shook hands, took the mic, and just as he started his speech, Richard's phone buzzed, then David's, then 2 other board members. One by one, screens lit up with an anonymous email. Subject: "For the board's eyes only. EP. Misuse of funds." Attached, every file from the USB. The room didn't know it yet, but the power had shifted. Ethan kept speaking, oblivious, while whispers spread among the board members, like fire through dry grass. Richard's jaw tightened. David leaned back, hiding a grin behind his glass. And then, just as Ethan said, "I couldn't have done this without my incredible wife, Lauren," Richard stood up abruptly. "Mr. Price," he said, voice like a blade. "Can I have a word?" Privately. The room froze. Madison shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Ethan blinked, confused. But he followed. I sat there, calm, unbothered, because I knew exactly what was happening behind that door. Later, David told me the conversation almost broke him. Richard threw the printed files on the table. Hotel invoices, receipts, personal texts sent during company hours. Madison's name plastered across company expense reports like a neon sign. "What the hell is this?" Richard barked. Ethan stammered, lied, tried to spin it as misunderstanding. But numbers don't lie. Expense accounts don't lie. And Madison had also signed some of the reimbursement forms. This wasn't just an affair. It was a corporate liability. "Do you realize," Richard hissed, "what kind of lawsuit this could open us up to if this goes public? You could cost us millions." Ethan begged, pleaded, offered to make it right. But the damage was done. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was a scandal with a $300,000 paper trail. While Ethan was still in that meeting, Madison paced outside, heels clicking like a ticking clock. She finally spotted me. "You," she spat, walking over. "You're behind this." I tilted my head, pretending to be confused. "Behind what, dear?" Her voice cracked. "The files. The emails. You ruined him." I smiled faintly. "No, sweetheart. He did that all by himself. I just watched." She faltered. Because deep down, she knew it was true. Then, as if the reality finally landed, she whispered, "They're not promoting him, are they?" I leaned closer, my voice low and almost kind. "No, and they're not keeping you either." Her face went pale. The door opened. Ethan walked out. No more confident posture. No smile. Just a man who realized the world doesn't revolve around him anymore. Richard followed, expression cold. "Due to certain irregularities, we are postponing the board appointment. Mr. Price, hand in your company card. Effective immediately." The room went silent. Forks froze mid-air. Madison's eyes filled with tears. Ethan glanced around like a cornered animal. And then his eyes landed on me. I didn't flinch. I just raised my glass slightly like a toast. That was the moment he knew. On the way home, the silence was so thick it felt like a living thing between us. He drove with one hand on the wheel, knuckles white. "Finally," he said. "You did this." I didn't deny it. "You built the bomb," I replied calmly. "I just lit the match." "You destroyed my career," he snapped. "No, Ethan," I said, turning to face him. "You destroyed our marriage. Your career was collateral damage." He slammed his hand on the wheel. "Why didn't you just divorce me?" I laughed softly. "Because you don't get to walk away clean." The next morning, the company released an internal memo. "Madison Cole has been terminated for violation of corporate conduct." She texted him, called him, showed up at our house once. But Ethan didn't answer. Because for men like him, mistresses are luxuries, not partners. Once the empire falls, so do the side pieces. I watched her through the window as she stood at the gate, crying. And for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But she had chosen to be part of his lie. And lies have consequences. Ethan spent the next week in a haze. His promotion was revoked. His reputation, once untouchable, was now whispered about in every hallway of the company. And me? I was calm, controlled, in a way I hadn't been in years. I had the house in my name, the financial accounts secured, a legal team on standby, and the respect of people who once only saw me as the wife. The tables had turned. He used to hold all the power. Now I did. One night, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, just like the morning after the gala. But this time, the arrogance was gone, replaced by fear. "Lauren," he said hoarsely, "please, let's just fix this. We can go to therapy. We can rebuild." I tilted my head. "Rebuild what? The house you set on fire?" He clenched his jaw. "We have a family." "Yes," I said, "and I'm going to protect it. From you." I slid a single manila envelope across the table. Inside, divorce papers. Pre-drafted, clean, calculated. He opened it. His hands shook. "You planned this." I met his eyes, cold and steady. "Yes, while you were busy planning hotel reservations." Ethan didn't sign the divorce papers. Of course he didn't. Men like him don't accept consequences. They try to negotiate with them. "I'm not losing everything," he growled 2 days later, pacing across the living room like a man who had just discovered the ground beneath him was quicksand. "You already did," I said calmly. He slammed the papers on the coffee table. "Half. I'll give you half of everything. We can keep the house, keep the accounts, just don't drag this through the courts." I leaned back in the chair, crossing my legs. "Ethan, sweetie, you seem to think I'm asking for permission." He froze. "I'm not asking," I said softly. "I'm informing you." My attorney, Victoria Han, was a quiet storm in a pencil skirt. She didn't yell. She didn't posture. She simply built cases like walls, brick by brick, airtight. She sat across from me at her office, flipping through the evidence. "We have financial misconduct, proof of marital infidelity, misuse of corporate funds, and a public scandal. This isn't just divorce, Lauren. This is leverage." I exhaled. "I don't want to destroy him." She smiled faintly. "You already have. Now, we just collect the pieces." Meanwhile, Ethan hired one of the top corporate divorce lawyers in Chicago. His strategy was obvious. Dispute marital assets. Minimize alimony. Paint me as emotionally unstable to win sympathy. But what he didn't realize was that I'd been documenting everything for months. Every email, every expense, every late night. He brought a sword. I brought a fortress. Madison showed up again. This time not in heels, but in tears. "Lauren, please," she said at my doorstep. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Did you accidentally book hotel rooms and charge them to the company?" She bit her lip. "He told me you two were basically over. He said you didn't love him anymore." Ah, the classic lie. Every cheater has a script, and Madison had believed every line. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then she said the one thing that made me smile coldly. "I can testify against him," she whispered. Bingo! Ethan thought Madison was still on his side. He didn't know she was now sitting in Victoria's office, signing a sworn statement, outlining everything from the first affair to the fake business trips, to how he pressured her into lying on expense forms. Victoria looked at me afterward. "With her testimony and the financial records, Ethan has zero chance." I nodded. But a part of me wasn't celebrating, because betrayal, even when avenged, still stings. I wasn't doing this out of rage anymore. I was doing this to close the book properly. Divorce court isn't glamorous like TV shows make it seem. It's cold. Clinical. A chessboard with lawyers for hands. Ethan walked in with his expensive attorney, trying to wear the mask of a victim. He even told the judge I had plotted to humiliate him out of revenge. But then came the exhibits. USB files. Receipts. Hotel records. Madison's sworn testimony. Ethan's lawyer stuttered halfway through his cross-examination. Madison's voice shook, but her words were a blade. He told me he'd leave her after the promotion. I believed him. I was stupid. The judge's face was unreadable. But I could tell. Ethan's empire wasn't just falling. It was ash. After the hearing, Ethan cornered me in the hallway. Gone was the charming executive. Gone was the arrogance. What stood before me was a man who had finally realized the consequences of his choices. "Lauren," he whispered, eyes bloodshot. "Please, don't take everything." I looked at him steadily. "Ethan, you spent years taking from me. My time, my trust, my dignity. This isn't revenge. This is balance." His shoulders sagged. For the first time in 20 years, he looked small. 3 weeks later, the court issued the ruling. The house was mine. 70% of joint assets awarded to me, due to proven infidelity and misconduct. Alimony and child support secured. Custody of the kids, sole legal and physical custody to me. No promotion, no severance. Merritt & Co. terminated him quietly to avoid scandal. He walked out of court alone. No wife, no career, no mistress. I walked out with my head high, not because I won, but because I survived. Madison called me one last time. "I'm leaving Chicago," she said. "This place has too many ghosts." I nodded. "Good." She hesitated. "Lauren, I really did love him." I sighed. "Yeah, I did too. She was young. She was foolish. But at least, unlike Ethan, she learned something. And for the first time, I wished her well. The night the divorce was finalized, I walked through the house alone. The living room still held echoes of family dinners and fake smiles. The bedroom still smelled faintly of betrayal. The walls still remembered everything. But now it was my house, my space, my future. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I'd already shed every tear I had the night of that promotion gala. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and whispered to the silence. It's over. The world didn't stop when Ethan's life imploded. The sun still rose over Chicago. People still rushed to work. The trains still rattled past the river. But something inside me had changed forever. I woke up one crisp morning in late November to the sound of silence. No hurried footsteps. No fake "good morning." No tension in the air. Just me. And peace. The divorce was finalized. The house was legally mine. For the first time in 20 years, my name wasn't attached to his shadow. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, made coffee, and stood by the window watching the city wake up. It wasn't just quiet. It was freedom. I hadn't worked full-time since the kids were born. Ethan always said, "You don't need to. I've got us." But that life was gone now. And instead of being afraid, I felt alive. I started consulting part-time with an old friend at a PR firm. Within weeks, I was leading projects like I never stopped working. I remembered who I was before I became Mrs. Ethan Price. Capable, sharp, respected. Every paycheck I earned with my own name on it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he'd taken. I worried about how the divorce would affect them. But children are more perceptive than we think. My daughter, Emily, once said, "Mom, the house feels lighter now." And she was right. I never told them the full story, just enough truth to protect their hearts. Ethan still saw them on weekends, under court arrangements, but their loyalty was clear. They saw who had stayed, who had protected them, who had not lied. One night, Emily hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm proud of you." That was worth more than any courtroom victory. Word spread quickly in corporate circles. Ethan's name was no longer spoken with admiration. It was whispered with pity and scandal. His former mistress had testified against him. The board lost all trust. He struggled to find another executive role. No firm wanted the man whose affair nearly cost Merritt & Co. millions in liability. He eventually settled for a lower-paying job at a small investment group in the suburbs. Far from the city lights he once worshipped. He called once. "Lauren," he said softly. "I miss what we had." I didn't even hesitate. "You miss the version of me that didn't see through you," I replied, and hung up. I got a postcard in the mail from Madison. "California," it said on the front. A beach. Bright sky. On the back, "Starting over. I'll never make the same mistake twice. M." I stared at it for a long moment. We were both women who had loved the same man. The difference? I had survived him. She had escaped him. And in a strange, unexpected way. I wished her well. The house had too many ghosts, too many memories of a life built on lies. So I sold it. Not out of spite, but to breathe again. I bought a smaller, sunlit apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. No echoes of his voice, no rooms that smelled of betrayal, just light, silence, and a new beginning. I furnished it slowly: plants, warm wood, candles, things I loved, not the sleek, cold aesthetic Ethan preferred. For once, everything was mine, and every nail I hammered into the wall felt like a declaration. I am not his wife anymore. I am me. One night, I sat at my desk with a blank sheet of paper and wrote, "Ethan, I loved you once, truly, deeply, enough to build an entire world around your dreams. But love without respect is a slow death. And you killed what we had long before I burned it down. This isn't revenge. This is justice. And now, I choose myself. Lauren." I folded it, sealed it, and placed it in a box. Not to mail, just to remind myself of who I had become. 6 months later, I went on my first date in 22 years. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't love at first sight. It was coffee with a kind man who asked me questions Ethan never did. Who listened when I spoke. Who didn't treat me like a shadow in his story. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed someone to complete me. I was already whole. But it felt good to be seen. 1 year to the day after Ethan's promotion night, I returned to the hotel where it all began. Not to cry, but to stand. The ballroom was hosting another gala, different people, different faces. I stood at the edge, unnoticed, and smiled to myself. A year ago, this place broke me. Tonight, It no longer had power over me. I walked out into the night air, my heels clicking against the marble floor like punctuation marks to a story finally finished. Standing by the lake, wind in my hair, I whispered to the dark water. They say betrayal kills you, but it doesn't. It carves you open. It shows you who you are when the world catches fire. I learned that love without honesty isn't love, it's a cage. And freedom isn't found in another person. It's found in the moment you choose yourself over the lie. I closed my eyes, breathed in the cold air, and let the past float away. I wasn't Ethan's wife. I wasn't Madison's rival. I was Lauren Price. And I was free. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and share it with your friends. And hey, let me know in the comments what you think about this video. Your feedback means a lot to me.